A growing divide is emerging among NATO allies over Israel's West Bank policies. France, Britain, Greece, Latvia, and Denmark backed the Urgent Security Council meeting, warning that the escalation is no longer limited to isolated incidents of violence. France says settlement expansion and rising settler attacks are part of a broader dynamic that threatens regional stability and the future of a two-state solution.
We cannot ignore what is happening in the West Bank. The violence that is perpetrated there is part of a broader dynamic whereby settlement activity is continuing and settler violence against Palestinian civilians is on the rise. This situation is a direct threat to regional stability and to the viability of the two-state solution.
Greece sharpened the focus on what it calls changing realities on the ground. Athens pointed to settlement expansion, evacuation orders, demolitions, evictions, and forced displacement. Its concern is that these developments could progressively erode the territorial and political foundations needed for a future Palestinian state. Greece also stressed that Israeli security concerns must be addressed, but within the framework of international law.
We are witnessing developments that threaten to fundamentally alter the realities on the ground. Settlement expansion, repeated evacuation orders, demolitions and evictions, as well as forced displacement. Such actions run counter to international law and Security Council Resolution 2334, while continuously eroding the foundations upon which the two-state solution must be built.
Latvia offered a different emphasis, warning against viewing the crisis entirely through the actions of one side. Riga argued that military power and armed resistance are both feeding a recurring cycle of violence. It called for Israeli security concerns and Palestinian aspirations to be addressed together, while insisting that the current trajectory cannot deliver lasting peace.
Madam President, for decades we have witnessed that military power, as well as armed resistance, fuels the recurring cycle of violence, reignited by proponents of extreme views on both sides. This trajectory does not constitute a path to sustainable peace. Addressing both the security concerns and the legitimate aspirations of Israelis and Palestinians requires renewed momentum.
Britain was much more direct about Israeli settlement policy. London condemned settler attacks and said perpetrators had acted with impunity for too long. But its central warning was about settlement expansion, particularly the E1 project. The UK says the project could divide the West Bank, while settlement growth more broadly undermines the viability of a two-state solution and increases insecurity for both Israelis and Palestinians.
Settlements are illegal under international law. They undermine the viability of a two-state solution, and they fuel insecurity for both Palestinians and Israelis. The Government of Israel has approved 104 settlements in 4 years, an increase of 80%, and allocated unprecedented funding to the construction of new settlements. The United Kingdom condemns threats to expand illegal settlements and outposts and opposes the decision to reintroduce the E1 settlement plan, which aims to cut the West Bank in half.
Denmark connected the violence and settlement expansion directly to the viability of the two-state solution. Copenhagen said Palestinian children are already experiencing the consequences through violence, displacement, and the destruction of livelihoods. It called for settler violence to stop, perpetrators to be held accountable, and settlement expansion to end. And Denmark warned that the longer the current trajectory continues, the harder a political solution becomes.
Colleagues, developments in the West Bank threaten the vision of a two-state solution that we, as international community, have elaborated in so many resolutions and declarations over the past decades. The longer we wait, the less realistic that vision becomes. This Council must stay loyal to its decisions and ensure the implementation of a two-state solution, reuniting Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, under a reformed Palestinian leadership along the 1967 borders. Two states where Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side in peace and security.
But the American position reveals the limits of any claim that NATO allies have completely united against Israel. Washington condemned violence by any party and welcomed Israeli measures to counter violence in the West Bank. The US also explicitly opposes annexation, but its intervention placed greater emphasis on security, Palestinian Authority reforms, Hamas disarmament, and Trump's wider peace plan, rather than joining its European allies in making settlement expansion the central focus.
As the United States has said many times, we strongly condemn violence by any party in the West Bank. The United States appreciates the Israeli government's condemnation of and the increased actions to counter violence in the West Bank. Israel has taken specific steps, such as increasing law enforcement actions, to boosting the IDF presence, and to allocating significant financial resources to counter violence. The United States will continue to work constructively to increase security, reduce tensions, and enhance stability that is beneficial for both Israelis and Palestinians alike.
And while Washington explicitly reiterated its opposition to West Bank annexation, its approach remains distinct from the sharper criticism coming from several European NATO allies. The result is not NATO versus Israel, but a growing NATO divide over how Israel's West Bank policies should be confronted.